Hello there, my name is Jamie Bancroft and I will be your Dungeon Master for this evening. With it being International Tabletop Day on April the 29th, I thought it would be a good idea to introduce some people to roleplay tabletop games, my favourite of which being Dungeons and Dragons. Now, we're going to get into some of the minutiae of what Dungeons and Dragons is. Specifically 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons by Wizards of the Coast, the people who release the official D&D. There's a lot to talk about, there's far too much to talk about, so instead we're just going to go into a very quick character creation session. To create a character, you'll need this. This is the player's guide. Now, everything about playing Dungeons and Dragons is held within these pages. Everything you could want from the rules, to what you can make from your character, to what happens when you level up. It's all in here. Really, this is the only book you need to play with. Now, if you're a dungeon master, like myself, you might want this one. This helps you put together a world and a story and a campaign. Now, you can buy ready-made campaigns, but this really helps any dungeon master put together a story that their players can really get the teeth into. And then beyond that, this is the really fun one, with all the creatures and villains and enemies that any dungeon master might want to try to not exactly kill the party, but give them a good run for the money. There's some very creepy things in here. Great for the DM, terrible for the players. But we're just going to stick with this one. Now, when making characters, there are a few key points to consider. Race, class, and your background. Sort of the more personality of your character, where they're from, the story, why they do what they do. But it's always a good place to start with what is your character. The playable races are very sort of fantasy oriented. You've got the dwarves, elves, halflings, because no one wants to be sued by Lord of the Rings. A halfling is essentially a hobbit, but we're not allowed to call them that. Humans, we all know what that is. Dragonborn, if you want to play a scaly individual. Half-orcs, if you want to play someone who may not think their way out of a situation, they'd rather punch their way out of a conversation. And tieflings, which are very interesting individuals and give you a lot of fun things to play with. Beyond there, you have your classes, which is essentially your role in the game. You've got fighters, you've got monks, you've got warlocks, you've got wizards, you've got sorcerers, you've got barbarians, fighters, rangers, whatever your playstyle. There is something in here for you. So I'm going to go for one of the most basic, but one of the most useful combos. A human fighter. Now, might not seem overly fantasy, but they play a very, very key role. A human in any fantasy setting can do whatever they want, because they are the benchmark for everything else. They are the industrious race. They can do what they want. They run most of the world because there's just so many of them. Now, that gives you a lot of free rein to decide, my character will do this. You don't have to give a reason, because it makes sense that human might be there. Whereas if you were playing a Dragonborn, for instance, you might have to give a reason why this exotic race is where you've decided to put them. And a fighter, well, in a world filled with magic, someone who doesn't have to rely on it won't be hindered by it. They won't be hindered by requiring spells. These people are very proactive fighters. They don't need to rest as often, They're the ones that always keep the party moving. These are the ones that keep the party going and really help drive a story. So we'll go with that. Consider these things. What kind of weapon and what kind of armor do you want your character to have? And that will help focus where you want to put your stats. Now, your stats are how we're going to decide whether or not you manage to succeed in the things you do. And we get those by rolling. The dice are what decide whether or not you succeed or fail. Because it's all well and good saying you want to do something, but you have to have an element of chance. The dice decides what you do. You choose what you try to do, but the dice tells you if you do it. Now, the D20 is the most popular dice. It's a 20-sided dice. Everything revolves around this. Every roll you make, before a damage roll or anything like that, it's going to be this. You try to talk your way out of a situation, you roll this. This is the lifeblood of Dungeons and Dragons. This dice is the lifeblood of all tabletop role-playing games. Respect the dice, because they will not respect you. Sometimes you'll try something really cool and you'll get a 1. And you have to go with it. You just have to. Them's the rules. Unless your DM is kind, because sometimes the rules are meant to be broken. The rule of cool is actually in there. If the DM decides, I'll let you do it. You can do it. That's a good DM. A DM that listens to his players gets a good game. Now, when you get your stats, you roll for them randomly or you can take the original ones. I'm not going to roll them all, but essentially your stats are what define your character. On the sheet, they go down this bracket. Nice and big so you always know what they are. You get strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Now that we have our human fighter, who is a soldier, with his personality traits, his ideals, his bonds and his flaw, you're really ready to go. You don't need much else. Just make sure that your character sheet is filled in using the instructions in the book. I would go through that, but that would be a much longer video. Just make sure that you talk to your DM, make sure that they know who you're playing, make sure that you've shared any information that they might need to know, such as armor class or passive perception. You'll find out what they are when you start playing. And yeah, then you're just good to go. Get a group of friends together and get rolling. And a good place to start, in my opinion, is the official starter set. The Lost Mines of Phandelver is the 5th edition starter set that Wizards of the Coast release. Now, within this box, you get a start adventure, a full from level 1 to level 5 campaign. You get pre-built character sheets with additional information on the sort of character that they are. So it's a good place to get reference for what you need to do for a character sheet. You get a basic rulebook that tells you everything you need to know without having to buy the player's handbook, as well as some maps of towns, some maps of dungeons, some traps, all the way through to anything you might need to play the game. So if you're thinking about starting, the starter set is a very, very good option. And well, from there, if you decide that this hobby is for you, you can always get the core books, which are the player's handbook, the monster manual, and the Dungeon Master's Guide, if you're a Dungeon Master. Now, beyond there, they do release extra books. Now, these are non-vital, but they just go into more detail about certain things. So this is essentially another monster manual, but it gives me more information about the creature's habits, where they live, more creatures, things like that. But yeah, that is a very brief, very quick introduction to Dungeons and Dragons. I hope it's piqued your interest, and I hope it makes you want to start rolling dice.